You're listening to Leadership Powered by Common Sense with your host, Doug Thorpe. Here's Doug.
Well, hello again, everyone. This is Doug Thorpe, and you are listening to Leadership Powered by Common Sense. We are the show that tries to help you as a busy leader do more and find your full sense of fulfillment, but we do it in trying to identify some simple and bite-sized ways to think about it. Today, my guest is a gentleman who has a focus area that I find quite intriguing. He has written a book, and we're going to kind of lead off with the title of the book, The Mentally Strong Leader. I love that idea. My guest is Scott Mautz. Scott, welcome to the show.
Hey, Doug, thanks so much to be here. I'm hoping to bring uncommon wisdom to common everyday leadership.
I love it. And that's exactly my vibe, my jive, and everything that I like to talk about. In fact, the title of my first book was The Uncommon Commodity, The Common Sense Guide for First-Time Managers. And it is, divert a minute, it is an interesting debate. I tell the story that as I landed on this tag idea, I was talking to a marketing agency who told me I needed to run from it. It was a bad idea. It was a horrible tagline. Leadership powered by common sense, that is. And I said, well, guess what? You're not my firm. I'm not going to run away from that. In fact, quite the contrary. I like it a lot because I think the world could use a little more common sense these days. I think we try to make things way too complicated, and certainly there are places where that's appropriate. But in terms of leadership, I argue not so much. The more leaders can do to create clarity and direct focus, and maybe it's my Army upbringing, keep it simple, stupid. Let's get this going here. So anyway, enough of that. Let's talk about your mentally strong leader idea. Where did that come from, Scott?
Yeah, I'll start, Doug, with a definition for your audience so that we're all on kind of the same page. Mental strength, first and foremost. Mental strength is the ability to regulate your emotions and your thoughts and your behaviors productively, even in adversity, despite the circumstances, or as I like to say, it's how we manage internally so we can lead much better externally. And I think, the first kind of underpinnings of the book came to mind with a simple truth, Doug, which is, I think we all know, that if we want to be successful at work and in life, you have to be able to regulate your emotions and your thoughts and your behaviors productively. You can't just do what you say, feel what you feel all the time, act on whatever you're thinking all the time. We all know you have to regulate that to be successful, but it's really hard to do that sometimes. Really hard to do that. So the first wisp was kind of from a mindset of servitude that I'd been studying for a very, very long time, and we'll get into that more on, how you can actually build the habits to increase your mental strength. And that matters because as it turns out, and I'll share a study in a moment, but it turns out it's like a cheat code for achievement, Doug. It's how you literally train your brain for achievement. And having spent my first 3 decades in corporate life, I saw a long time ago the need for this, what I call the superpower leadership and self-leadership superpower of our times, mental strength. I saw this need in so many people that weren't using common sense in the workplace, that weren't mentally strong. And I'll go to the next level of what that means, but that was the first underpinning of where that started. I saw this unmet need of, I need help in regulating my emotions, thoughts, and behaviors. Right? Does that make sense? Is that surprising that that's where it started from?
No, not at all. And I think if I can paraphrase, it's the classic, we've all worked for managers that probably didn't deserve to be in that seat. And they were quick to pop off, they were quick to react, not respond, and there was no governing, there was no filter on what they did. And I think those that behaved that way eventually got, sucked into the whole politically correct movement and all these other things that have evolved in the work world. And what I would like to do is, I'm hearing what you're saying, and let me just ask the question. This sounds perilously similar to the popular buzzword now, emotional intelligence.
Yeah. Here's the good news, though. It's quite different from that. The way to think about it is that mental strength is a much, much, much broader umbrella. And emotional intelligence, or EQ, emotional intelligence being getting your emotions to work for you versus against you. That is a small sliver of the much broader umbrella of mental strength. And I'll share a piece of research that indicates why. So I asked, well, I've been doing research on this for so long now, Doug, but one piece of research really stuck out in my mind on this. I asked 3,000 executives, actually 3,200 if you want to be precise, thinking of the highest achieving organizations you've ever been a part of that overcame the most obstacles. What were the attributes of the key leaders at that time in that organization that you were a part of that achieved so much? And I found that over 91% of respondents all described the same profile of a leader, well beyond emotionally intelligent. They were mentally strong. Said another way, they were calm in a storm. They were in control. They were intentional. They used common sense. They exercised 6 core mental muscles, the 6 core mental muscles that equate to mental strength, which will help you understand why this is so much more than just emotional intelligence. Well, that's of course important. And the 6 mental muscles of mental strength are fortitude, confidence, boldness, decision-making, the ability to make good decisions and do so decisively, goal focus, the ability to stay focused on goals and keep your organization focused on their goals, and messaging, the ability to stay positive-minded in your messaging, not get pulled into whatever negativity is going on around you at the time. So these 6 core mental muscles that make up mental strength, fortitude, confidence, boldness, decision-making, goal focus, and positive messaging to the troops, that all equates to and correlates in a huge way to achievement. It's literally the leadership superpower of our times and the cheat code for achievement, which is so much broader than that one narrow slice of emotional intelligence. Does that make sense, Doug?
Totally. And I can't help but think about, as you're describing all of that, I happen to have been replaying the watch of Band of Brothers, and the central character played by Damian Lewis is a leader that is all of that, all of those 6 things that you described. When you started down that list, I was just somehow that immediately came to mind. But that sense of resolve and confidence and never wavering from your sense of mission and purpose, regardless of what all negative might be going on around you. Fascinating story and a real study in leadership. For those who haven't seen it yet, Band of Brothers, it's a great testament to the greatest generation, but also this one individual and his demonstration of unflappable leadership in the face of horrible challenges. But anyway, not to digress. So when you think about applying those or exercising those 6 muscles, where does a leader begin in the process of maybe assessing where they are in each of the 6 areas and then figuring out a workout plan for those muscles?
Yeah. Well, here's the good news. I don't want listeners or viewers or anybody to be intimidated by, wow, yes, mental strength is really important. I get it. It's the cheat code to achievement. I get it. It's a superpower. I get it. But 6 mental muscles, that sounds like a lot. It's okay. Take a deep breath. First, know that the opposite, Doug, of mentally strong is not mentally weak. We all have a baseline of mental strength to work from. You just have to understand what your baseline looks like. And in the book, The Mentally Strong Leader, you can take the mental strength self-assessment. 50 questions that I've vetted and proven thousands of times, statistically validated to be the best representation of how to determine the level of someone's mental strength. So not only do you get your overall mental strength score, you also get scores by each mental muscle: fortitude, confidence, boldness, decision-making, goal focus, and your ability to positively message and stay positive with those around you, even in negativity. So you get a score on each one of those, and then it begins to tell you, okay, so if you got this score, there's 4 different tiers that you can score in, all the way from novice at the lowest level, all the way up to beacon. You're an actual source of mental strength. Others are drawn to you because of your mental strength. And then tiers in between. You find out where you lie, and it also gives you tips on what tools to use in the book to go help, which leads to the second part of your question. So how do you figure out, okay, so now I know what my mental strength is. What muscles do I build? Well, you do that by habit building. And I have as the underpinning of the mentally strong leader, Doug, habit building science built into that to teach you how to build those muscles up with habits that will actually help you change your mental strength. And just to touch on it briefly, I use 3 core tenets of habit building science within the book. First of all, you can't build a habit without repetitions, right? If you think of yourself going to the gym, you got to lift those weights multiple times to build up those muscles. Well, in this world, building your mental strength, those repetitions come from systems and frameworks that allow you to automatically and naturally get those repetitions in. So the over 50 plus tools in the book all show up as mini self-regulation systems or frameworks to help you get the repetitions in. Point number 2 of habit building science. You got to know where to start. And often, this is just kind of fact and science, we often don't build the habits we want to, Doug, because we don't even know where to start. Well, in the Mentally Strong Leader, for every one of the 50 plus tools you can leverage and the habits you can build to build your mental strength and across those 6 muscles, it tells you not only the first small step that you could take, but also the third part of habit building science built into the book. What do you do in moments of weakness? And we know that when people's habits break down in moments of weakness, for example, let's say someone's super confident most of the time, but they're working on getting to be confident all the time. They go into a meeting with a boss and the boss makes them look bad. They feel terrible about themselves coming out because they weren't ready for the meeting. They weren't prepared for the questions, and their confidence starts to sink. Well, in that moment of weakness, what tool can you draw on? What can you do to bring yourself back up in that moment of weakness to actually create the habit and actually build that confidence muscle? So the habit building science combined with the mental strength self-assessment, Doug, to answer your question, are tools that will help leaders figure out how specifically will I build my mental strength.
So how does this mental strength paradigm line up with all the popular personality tests and evaluations that are out there? Where does that enter in? Do they intersect? And
yes,
is there a connection?
I'm proud to say that I think this is a pretty unique test. It's the first one that I know of. I know in one other test that's about mental toughness, which is slightly different than this. But as far as I know, it's a pretty unique offering, especially because it's built around what we now know are the things that you have to self-regulate if you want to achieve it. If you think about those 6 mental muscles, Doug, there's not a single one of those you don't have to self-regulate. Like, you can't be resilient and show fortitude all the time without monitoring how you feel and what you say and how you act. You can't show up as confident all the time without self-monitoring. You can't be bold and willing to take risks all the time without, self-regulating. All the things that tell you I should be afraid to fail and pushing back on that and so on. So I think that the assessment is one of a kind. And at the end, I'll even let your listeners get their hands on a little gift where they can take the self-assessment for free.
Wonderful. Well, it is interesting, and I don't know if you and I would have to talk much deeper, but I know over the years I've developed certain habits, and one of those is the notion of doing a little daily evaluation. What did I do the day before? Did I show up the way I wanted to? Did I miss an opportunity? Did I come short of my own expectation about how I wanted to show up? And I always encourage my coaching clients, when you do that, don't beat yourself up. I mean, some personalities are prone to just self-abuse in that category when you're doing those kind of evaluations. But try to be objective, try to be factual as best you can. But it's a quick assessment. And to give you an example, I had a very busy day yesterday and didn't really, by the time the day was over, I just really wanted to get home, sit down, have dinner with my wife and relax a little bit. So I didn't do it. But this morning, I was scheduled for an early breakfast meeting, and I got there about 30 minutes ahead, and I decided to have that moment, sitting in my car, nice and comfortable, pretty secluded. I did that evaluation and that little bit of self-talk about why did I close out the day thinking, feeling, and believing what I did yesterday versus what I know to be my truth of where I really want to be going. And I was able to kind of do that reconnect and recalibration even before I went into my first meeting of the day. And if I do say so myself, I think that first meeting went very well because we were able to, messaging I had to do in that meeting was clear. The resolve I had for where I wanted to go. This was a person who was a contractor working for me. I wanted to talk about some transactions we were in the middle of, and net, I think it went very well. We had a really good exchange, and I think positive outcome from it. So what I'm saying is, now that you're bringing this up, I'm not sure I would have had the same breakfast outcome if I hadn't tried to take that moment, to kind of do my level setting based on where things ended up for me yesterday.
Yeah, you took the moment to, that is an excellent example, Doug, and story of just exuding some mental strength, taking a moment to say that, things didn't work out, but I'm not going to let my inner chatter kick in and take over. It's very smart. You took a moment of self-acceptance and you understood that, okay, it didn't go perfect, but I have a place to build from, and I'm willing to take a look at what I need to do to get stronger. It's a great example of self-regulating your emotions, your thoughts, and your behaviors. Because you could have flown off the handle and said, man, I really blew it yesterday, and then blown your whole morning by letting your emotions take over and your feelings and your actions.
Exactly.
So well done. That's a perfect example of mental strength in action.
Well, and that is a little hint. So, bonus to the audience here, if you're not doing that kind of daily scorekeeping, and again, I want to stress, I'm not a psychologist, but I know people who, personality-wise, may have a tendency to overdo that, but take a simple stroll down memory lane for the day, just for the day. And again, you don't have to really pick it apart, but kind of a simple grading. Did that meeting go well? Did I show up the way I really intended to or wanted to? What did I miss? What could I have done differently? Or give yourself credit and celebrate the win. Man, that event was perfect. I was right on. I hit all my marks. Good for you, Doug. Pat on the back, and give yourself credit for those wins along the way as well. I think that is a big part of maintaining your strength and your resilience as you go forward in these things. So, well, what else does a leader need to be thinking about when they're wanting to really sort of exercise and boost this level of mental strength?
Yeah, I think an important thing, and I want to build on what you just said, Doug. I want to park ourselves just for a second on the confidence muscle. It's one of the key elements of mental strength, and in my data, I see that it's one of the ones that if you don't keep at it, it can dip pretty quickly. Even the most confident people in the world will tell you that the definition of confidence is not the absence of doubt. And so, in the Mentally Strong Leader, I have 2 tools to help you build the confidence muscle in particular. And they're built around 2 important things, Doug. You have to monitor your relationship with doubt, and you have to monitor your relationship with yourself. And you just gave an example of both, and I'm going to go a little bit deeper here. So first, there's a tool in the Mentally Strong Leader called the Doubt Continuum. And it asks you to monitor your relationship with doubt. And those are big words, Doug, because that presumes that all of us have a relationship with doubt. And whether or not you've ever thought about it, we do. We all do. But our relationship looks very different depending on your level of mental strength. And I have interviewed so many people in understanding mental strength that I can tell you the most confident people I've ever met will tell you confidence is not the absence of doubt. They still feel doubt at times. They've learned how to manage it. They know the doubt continuum. It goes all the way from self-confident all the way over to paralyzed by fear. And in between, you can choose to be perfectly confident or even embrace healthy doubt. And in the Mentally Strong Leader, I give tools for each one of those and how to combat that. But it starts by understanding you will have a relationship with doubt, and that's okay. You have to know how to manage it when it shows up. And I teach how to do that. The second thing is you got to monitor your relationship with yourself. And that's what you did really well in that story you told about the quiet moments you spent in the car. I talk in the Mentally Strong Leader about the self-acceptance scale, which means it's a scale. On one end, there's self-acceptance. And then as you move to the right, you can go all the way over to imposter syndrome, where you're so not confident, you're not even accepting what you've achieved in your life and how you got there. And you start to believe what other people are saying that might be doubting you. And then in between, Doug, there's all these degradations of our confidence that can happen all the way if we're not monitoring our thoughts, our emotions, and behaviors. And I'll give you a few examples. You can quickly go from fully on one side of the spectrum, self-accepting, to, before you know it, you're approval seeking. You start to chase approval instead of authenticity. Another degradation. You can go all the way over to comparing to others, forgetting that the only comparison that matters is to who you were yesterday and whether or not you're making a better version of yourself. You could continue to degrade, where you're engaged in negative inner chatter, beating yourself over and over. And then one more degree, you could start to believe you're actually not enough. And I want your listeners to know you are enough. You don't have to take on everything by yourself. And the degradation continue to imposter syndrome and so on, Doug. And so there's all these opportunities for our confidence to slip. It's why it's so important to be able to self-regulate. And it's an ongoing journey to stay confident over time. You were going to say?
I was going to ask the question. You spoke the word, the imposter syndrome. In the executive coaching realm, we often run into that. Clients, usually on a very short list of concerns, they will some way, somehow express that notion, I feel like an imposter. And my usual first reaction to that when I hear it with a brand new client is, guess what? You're not alone.
Yes,
Let's get that off the table.
That's right.
You are not unique in that feeling. Everybody, regardless of how successful they seem on the outside, has or does experience that. And it can ebb and flow, but it's ever present. And I like the way you break it down, that sort of combination, if I can paraphrase it and correct me, please, that combination of your relationship with doubt and what was the other one? Your self-acceptance.
Yeah.
Self-acceptance, yeah. And what's interesting, I'll tell a quick story along that line. I had a client a few years ago, banking executive that was doing very well. He had been identified in the selection process to replace an outgoing senior executive that was due for retirement, but there was a 2-year window to make this happen. So it was all planned and programmed. The whole succession was mapped out. So my client had gone to work as the number 2 guy in this department with the senior still being there, rocked along for 2 full years, right? Shadowing, monitoring, matching, learning. The day came for the senior to retire, literally pack his box and walk out the door and change the name on the door. My guy moved into the corner office, and the next session I had with him, he said, "Doug, you won't believe what's happened to me." I said, "What?" I said, "I'm thinking, congratulations, it finally is here." He goes, "No." He said, "I feel like such an imposter." And I said, "Really? Well, let's break this down. You have been doing the job for 2 years. Why the sudden shift?"
Isn't that funny? Just like that, Doug, right?
So not knowing any of the other details, Scott, why do you think that happened for him?
Well, I think there's a couple of things that, I think probably happened in that case and things that he could do. And, I go pretty deep in imposter syndrome in the Mentally Strong Leader as a tool, because in many ways it's, the opposite of being mentally strong. You give in to these preconceived notions that you didn't deserve what you got. And just so that everyone's on the same page, by the way, imposter syndrome obviously is when you downplay your accomplishments and your worth. You doubt your intellect and skills. You question how you got to where you are. And if I could have seen your friend at that time, maybe I would have told him 3 things. First of all, it sounds like maybe he was truly underestimating and appreciating himself. He would have needed to ask himself, where do I genuinely need to give myself more credit? Where am I assigning too much credit to other things? And yes, there are some external factors that can happen, right? And we see this all the time in people with imposter syndrome, which disproportionately happens amongst women, by the way. That's just stats and science. And women in particular tend to focus on the external factors that got them to where they are. Men have a much better time. Again, this is just the statistics. Have a much easier time of saying, no, it's all me. I'm the reason I'm here. But it sounds like in your friend's case, Maybe he engaged too much in assigning credit to external factors. So I like to say, okay, externally I understand, but now internally, what is inescapably true about you and what you brought to the table? Number one. Second thing that could have gone wrong here, is I would have encouraged him to be open to imposter discomfort, but closed to imposter thoughts. And here's what I mean by that. So let's say your friend I don't know his particular situation. Let's say he's just got thrust into a new team that he has to lead. Rather than spending his time wondering if he can lead that team, it's important to think about how he can lead that team. And you do that by allowing imposter discomfort. Yes, you're new to the team. You question if you can do this. That is natural. Like you said, Doug, we all feel this at times. That's natural. But what I need you to be closed on is imposter thoughts. Think of them as a thought bubble outside of your head, damaging thoughts saying, you can't do this. That's outside from your body. That's someone who doesn't have your best interests at heart talking to you. Why would you listen to them? The discomfort is okay. Live with it. It'll make you stronger. The specific thoughts, not so good. Then I would have encouraged him to go to maybe a third step, which is to be really careful to think of his value and his values, not his valuation. Meaning, I would have encouraged him to say, stop worrying about what valuation others are placing on you. Whether you got to where you got in a fair way and you deserve what you've got. Think instead of your value and values, meaning, what value do you inescapably bring to the table that you know is uniquely you that you bring? And what are your values? What about you is immutably true that you know you want to focus on because it matters to you? Because here's the thing, Doug. Our imposter thoughts, they boo us from the cheap seats. But our values, they cheer us on from the front row, telling us, hey, no matter what, if you're living true to your values, you're in that job now, you're doing what you think is right, you're doing what you think makes a difference and what matters to you. And it sounds like maybe he didn't do too much of those things.
Yeah. Well, all probably true. I think the really compelling challenge is that having had the opportunity to be right on the front row of that role and duty and responsibility for 2 full years and embrace all that, meet all the team, know everybody, and then the day changed when his name went up on the door and that flipped the switch, whatever it was. So I ascribed it, and what we did end up talking a lot about was that very deep internal self-talk, because fundamentally nothing else changed.
That's right.
Really, except for the name on the door and the seat in the room, nothing else changed.
That's right.
Absolutely nothing changed.
And so somehow those voices booing him from the cheap seats got an awful lot louder. That he forgot that the power of himself could be sitting in the front row cheering him on. It's natural. It happens. It's like you opened that segment, Doug, by saying, first thing you need to know is you're not alone, because depending on the studies that you follow, there's statistics that say that as much as 82 to 85% of us have experienced imposter syndrome professionally in our lives at some point. So guarantee you're not alone.
Well, and not to beat this to death, but in the 2-year journey that he had shadowing the outgoing executive, that leader was smart, in my mind, in over time, as they got closer to that decision point or that transfer point, that outgoing leader delegated more and more and more and more and more, and had my client doing the work. He was making the decisions, and maybe the other executive was just signing the paper based on, but because of whatever authority that was there. But the outgoing leader had the wisdom to tell the new guy, all right, you've done this now for 1.5 years. The next 6 months, you're going to make all the decisions. I'll sit here, I'll provide a backstop or a safety net, whatever you want to call it, but all these decisions will be yours. And they were very successful, during that time period. No drop in performance or productivity. So anyway, it was just a very vivid example of how this imposter syndrome, those voices can kick in. I love your analogy, that chatter from the cheap seat. I love that. I mean, you may hear that in some of my other material soon, if I may.
That's good. That's good. No worries.
Well, what else do we need to know about being a mentally strong leader, Scott?
I think we were just talking about the confidence muscle, and there's also the fortitude muscle and the boldness muscle, messaging muscle, goal decision making. I'll talk just for a second about, let's switch gears and talk about the boldness muscle, because I see this one happen a lot. In the case of leadership, when we don't have boldness, obviously, boldness gives you a direct pathway to growth. It forces you to push your thinking, to get out of your grooves. It presses you past discomfort. It sparks innovation. It sparks risk-taking. It necessitates change. And when you don't have that, it can absolutely crumble a leader's potential in an organization. So I'll just focus on one important thing that I talk about in the Mentally Strong Leader about how to really increase the ability for people to encourage their organization to take risks. And I'll start with just a simple question to you, Doug. Have you ever been to a casino?
Oh, yes. Quite a few. Quite a few.
Quite a few times. Now, for those of you out there that are listening and don't believe in gambling, I'm not bringing that up to create controversy. There's a point I'm bringing this up. I happen to do some work for a Las Vegas casino, and I was doing a keynote and some leadership training for them and a workshop. And the night before that, we were just having dinner, a friendly dinner, and they were telling me about a throughput problem they were having on the casino floor. There was one game in particular that was causing a real problem in terms of the ratio of people standing around watching the game to the percentage of people that were actually stepping up and putting their money down and playing the game was so out of whack that it was creating a very unproductive throughput problem on the casino floor. So let me just pause for a second and see if you even want to hazard a guess as to what that one casino game might have been, Doug. You want to take a wild guess?
I'm guessing it's probably the roulette wheel.
Well, you're close. It has some similarities to it. In fact, it was the craps table.
Okay.
And for those of you folks at home that had never played craps, it's a really confusing looking thing. It's a pit,
that's
right?
exactly. I call it roulette. I know that's technically not right, but yes, the craps table. Yeah.
That's exactly right. It's a game you play with dice. You roll it into a pit. And if you look at it, there's all these machinations of how you can bet on, if 2 hits, if 3 hits, if 4 hits, if you get a 6, all these things that it's absolutely overwhelming. And they learned that. There's a saying in Vegas, step up and roll the dice. And if you've ever heard that term, it comes from Vegas. And they were finding that people literally would not step up and roll the dice in this game because they didn't understand the rules. Meanwhile, back at the office, guess what, Doug? People won't step up and take risks at work because they don't understand the rules of risk-taking. What happens when you as a leader decide you are going to define the rules of risk-taking? What if you literally called your organization together and said, okay, this is what a good risk looks like. Here's an example. This is what a bad risk looks like. This is what happens when you succeed with a risk. This is what happens when you fail with a risk. Here's who needs to approve what level of risk and so on. In the Mentally Strong Leader, I have a list of 20 questions that you can use. Whether you're the boss that needs to define the risks for everybody, or you want to have that conversation with your boss to understand what are the rules of risk-taking around here. What I find is when you engage in the rules, and there's no one that won't engage in that, Doug. If you went to even an ultra-conservative leader and said, I want to discuss the rules of risk-taking, no one on the planet is going to say, the only rule is never take a risk, ever. Don't do that. No leader is going to say that. But we don't know how to have that conversation. But if you have a list of the right questions to engage in, now people start to understand and visualize, this is what happens when you take a risk. And this is when it's okay to. I feel more emboldened to do that. And like that, you have an organization that is going to be bolder, right? Does that make sense?
Totally. And I'm thinking of a story in one of my engagements a number of years ago. I was called to work with a larger team of coaches with an executive leadership team of a large global brand. And the mission was they were earnestly trying to change the culture. But one of the tenets of the culture was to overcome a 100-year tradition of looking at an opportunity, but researching to 100% certainty the go, no-go on that opportunity. Mm-hmm. Well, guess what happens? As we all know, the Peralta principle kicks in. You can get 80% of the answer quickly, and it will be a good indicator of the go, no go. But the other 20% is going to be hard to find, hard to do, a lot of time, energy, and effort,
all kinds of resources,
resource burn to get that remaining 20%. So leadership said, new rules about risk. We're going to accept 70 to 80% certainty in our decision making. We want to expedite decision making. We're going to accept the fail if a fail happens. If the original 70, 80 told us go, do it, yes, and it still fails, that's okay. We're going to, flag in the sand, new concrete on the sidewalk, we're writing this rule, that's okay. No penalty, no perjury. Formerly, in the 100-year tradition, if you were a leader that made one of those decisions, and even if it had the 100% and you failed, there was this public execution thing that went on in a weird sort of way, but often near career ending for executives who suffered that. New rule was, nope, we're not going to do that anymore. We're going to go forward. Well, sadly, for 364 days, they exercised this. It went really well, and they got down to the annual review cycle, which was a mechanism that had not been adjusted for the new rule, and they had a legacy of forced place ranking. So they started ranking people, and guess what? The guys that were doing 70 and 80% decisions started falling down on the ranking scale. Versus those that were still perpetuating, couldn't let go of the 100% certainty. And unintentionally, it emerged in the rationale for doing the forced ranking the way they did. So in one day, they killed 364 days of effort to change the culture.
Isn't that funny? It's so, Doug, it's just another story. So often, how many times in your career have you seen this behavior of, it would seem that it would be, to the theme of your show, very common sense that if you want people to take risks, to define the rules and stick to that. But we fall into a different dance. We fall into a different behavior that's all too common, which is we'll talk a big game about wanting our people to take risks. So then when they fail, we punish them in some way, shape, or form. In this case, it took place on day 365 of 365. So I see it all the time, unfortunately.
Yeah. Well, to finish that story, the executive leadership realized the problem with that, and they moved swiftly to attack that rank rating system, and they abolished it as well. And so the next year they got it right. They went back to the truth and tried to do some reparation for those that got ranked, but it was messy, to say the least, but they I think in general moved forward and effectively made the change. But it's hard. It was very hard because of legacy and tradition that existed in the way they operated.
A happy ending. That's what we like.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. Well, Scott, I think we're about up on time for today. I really appreciate you sitting in. Tell folks the best way to get a hold of you if they're interested in learning more.
Yeah, you bet. Go to scottmautz.com, SCOTTMAUTZ.com. You can learn about the workshops and the keynotes I give. You can find the book, The Mentally Strong Leader, there, and all my other books. And a special gift I was mentioned before, Doug, for your followers, your listeners, your viewers, go to scottmautz.com/mentally strong gift, and you'll hit a landing page where you can download a free 60-page PDF that has the mental strength self-assessment that you can take for free if you want to get that going and understand what's your overall mental strength. How do I score on the 6 core mental muscles of fortitude, confidence, boldness, decision-making, goal focus, and positivity, messaging to the troops. And it also has prompts, specific prompts that will help you get the most out of the book, The Mentally Strong Leader. So for that 60-page free PDF that includes the mental strength assessment, go to scottmautz.com/mentally strong gift.
Wonderful. Well, Scott, I really appreciate both your sitting in, explaining all this, introducing us to this idea of mental strength for the leader, and also that free gift. And folks, as always, we're going to have those links in our show notes, so please do check out the listing of this episode. You'll get that hot link to jump over there. And one last time, Scott, thank you so much. This has been amazing.
Thank you so much, and let's just all have common sense going forward, right, Doug? Thanks for having me here.
Amen, amen. Well, folks, we are going to try to wrap this up and bring it to a close. I do like to remind you, we have a video version of this over on YouTube, channel by the same name, Leadership Powered by Common Sense. Hop over there, check out the archives, give us a comment, drop a link. Let me know if you've got an idea for a topic or a guest that would make sense for you, that you think would like to appear. And hey, if you're that person, if you'd like to show up, just drop me a line, let me know. We'll get you into the production loop and hope to see you soon. But for now, go out there, make it a great day.
You've been listening to Leadership Powered by Common Sense, hosted by Doug Thorpe. If you would like to know more about the coaching and advisory services he provides, visit dougthorpe.com.